Did you know that there's two sets of 10 commandments? What set of 10 commandments do you follow? Depends on your denomination because there are two versions. And today we're going to discuss that and the origins that come along with it. Okay, let's get into it. Most people don't realize, most Christians I should say, don't realize that there are two sets. Here's what happens. There were two physical sets, and there are two sets in the predominant Christianity world today. And it depends on your denomination which set you follow. So you'll have to check out and see which set you follow. But there are also two actual sets. Most people don't realize that. They get fooled by movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they say the ark has the pieces of the commandments that Moses shattered at the bottom of the mountain, which is not true. There were two sets. The first set, when they broke the covenant, Moses came down with the tablets, and the covenant was broken because they had the golden calf. So he shattered them, signifying the breaking of the covenant. But then later, he was told to go back up to the mountain with two sets of tablets exactly like the first ones that he cut himself, and God himself would write it on there. And that's what's in the ark today. When they discover the ark, inside in the bottom will be the two complete tablets, not like they said. So let's dive into the Ten Commandments, and we'll see what the difference between the two are in the two religions, or the denominations today. The first commandment is, "Thou shalt not have no other gods before me." And what does that mean, before me? The Hebrew word is elpaniah, which is in my face or in my presence, just like the king when you're in the court with the king, because God is the king. When you're in the courtyard in front of the king, you are before him. It doesn't mean you can have a flag where you can have your flag on the pole, but the American flag has to be higher. We're not talking about that. We're saying in his face, and because he's omnipresent, his face is everywhere. So no other gods anywhere. The second commandment, "Thou shalt not make any graven images," is one that the Jews suffered with continually. They loved their graven images right from the very beginning. When Moses came down with the commandments, that's when they broke the covenant originally, because they made a graven image, a golden calf. This is the problem that plagued the Jews throughout the land, or throughout their lives going into the land. And when they were in the land, it was because of graven images that they were kicked out of the land and taken by King Nebuchadnezzar into Babylon. Now, the third commandment, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." That's pretty self-explanatory. You have to give reverence to his name, to his holy name. And I'll mention it here. I believe his holy name is Yahovah. And some people call him Yahweh, but I believe it's Yahovah. The fourth commandment is, "Thou shalt keep holy the Sabbath day," which is important. And remember, the Sabbath is really Saturday. So that's the day I keep holy more so than Sunday, even though I go to church on Sunday. I keep the Sabbath holy myself. I don't do any work, nothing like that. I still try to keep that. I don't buy anything online. I don't buy anything anywhere. That's that moves us into the fifth commandment. The fifth commandment is, "Honor thy mother and father," which is extremely important. People overlook this commandment. This is the most overlooked commandment there is. If you watch my video on the family and how the family mimics God, in the family, we learn to honor our mother and fathers, not to say, "Look, you're wrong, I'm not listening to you," all this other stuff, because we learn in the family structure how to honor your father and your mother. So when we go to heaven, we honor our mother and father because we were brought up that way. Almost like manners. That's very important. So those are the first five. And let me just mention, these are the five, if you look in Exodus 20, these are the five that were, these are first five of the 10 that were shouted down by God himself in his own voice to the Israeli people who was at the base of the mountain listening to them. And the first five teaches us how to love God. Most people say it's the first three or first four, But I think it's the first five because of honor thy mother and father. That teaches us how to honor God. This brings us to the sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder. It's not thou shalt not kill. The King James Version says thou shalt not kill. But they're saying thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not lie in wait for your neighbor. Kill with anger. That's what they're talking about. It doesn't mean we can't kill animals to eat. It doesn't mean we can't kill people who are in violation, murderers, things like that. And as a matter of fact, God intends that to happen. He told the Jews that they have to kill the person who murdered somebody so that their blood spilled on the ground purifies the ground. Okay, that brings us to commandment number 7. Thou shalt not commit adultery. This one's pretty self-evident. I'm just going to make one comment on this too. In Matthew 5:28, Jesus famously said, those that look on women with lust in their eyes, or to lust after them, I should say, have already committed adultery in their heart. Well, he says lust after them. So does that mean every attractive girl that I see, I say, wow, I've committed adultery with her in my heart? I don't believe so. I think he's talking about, like, if I see a pretty girl and I start moving towards her, meaning what? Meaning I say, oh, do you know who that is? Oh, yeah, she works at the coffee shop. Oh, I never go to that coffee shop. But now I start going and I show up every day. I'm now sort of pursuing her. Whether I catch her or not, I'm still committing adultery in my heart. This brings us to the 8th commandment, thou shalt not steal. Very straightforward. Even defrauding is stealing. That's the same sort of thing. And then we'll move on to number 9. No bearing a false witness against thy neighbor. And that's one that we are breaking like mad in this country. People project things. They bear false witnesses in groups. Like we see this in our court systems. They make up stuff. Even the Pharisees, you have to give them credit for the trial, with Jesus when he was before Caiaphas. They asked him, they brought witnesses in and said, they did their diligence and asked the witnesses, and they said, the witnesses don't agree with each other. So even they honored it, but then they moved on, to do what happened. That brings us to the 10th commandment. The 10th commandment, I'm going to read it verbatim out of the King James because the phrasing of this is very important. And you'll see in a little bit when I start breaking it down. Now this is chapter 17 verse 17 of chapter 20. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. It's very important, and if you remember the order, wife was second, house was first. Just remember that. And I'm going to start breaking down, and I'm going to compare it to the second set of 10 commandments that are out there in predominantly big denominations that use these. So, keep an eye, and you can find out at the end what 10 commandments your denomination falls into. Okay, now we'll get to the second set of 10 commandments that are popular. What happens is, and you can see them in the side by side here, that the second commandment is removed. So no graven images is taken out completely. And then you can see all the other commandments are moved up. So that throws the order off. That's why when Christians talk to each other and you say, oh, the 5th commandment, honor my mother and father. No, thou shalt not kill. That's why there's so much confusion when you talk. People don't seem to know what they're saying. These are very important. God shouted these down for a reason. Okay, now let's look at the second set. 6 to 10 on both of these. And you look what happens when you get down to 9 and 10. 9 is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And remember, I said, when I read it, that's why I read the passage. Thy, it was first, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, then thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. So they ripped 9 out of the center of the 10th commandment, and they made it 9. And then the 10th commandment they replaced with, thou shalt not covet anything that is thy neighbor's. So you can see there's a little bit of sleight of hand to make 10 again. So this is why I say you got to be very careful with your denominations, and you got to know the book. If you don't know the book, you don't know what God said, and you're misled into doing things. This is what I call, this is a destruction, I would say, because anytime you alter the original, by any means, even if you're trying to make it better, you still destroy it. So like Mona Lisa, if I took the Mona Lisa painting and they gave it to me, and I say, it'll look cute, if I just put a couple of little tiny earrings in her ear, I destroyed the whole painting. No matter how nice I made those earrings, I still destroyed the painting. So the bottom line is, you have to take this on yourself and understand the Bible. You have to understand the Old Testament. It's very important. I'm an Old Testament Christian. I think this is all very important stuff. You can't understand the New Testament unless you understand the Old Testament. And that's the big takeaway from here. If you don't read Exodus 20, at least Exodus 20, you don't know what God actually said. And it's funny, these denominations have it in their book. They have it in their Bible, exactly what God said, and they're not listening, and they changed it. And people don't realize. Now, I understand how this could happen centuries ago because people didn't have access to the Word of God. They were written on sheepskin and scrolls, and they were lucky if their church had one. So they were relying on, and even in the early days when books weren't available because they were copied, they were relying on their ministers to give them the correct Word of God. Now, if they changed it, how do they know? They don't know. As a person, you don't know. But once we started getting the books in our hands a few hundred years ago, that we could have our own copy, that's when we should have put our foot down with the churches and say, no, this is not what God said. You're responsible for yourself. It's like I said, you go to church to worship with other people, and I do that too. And I don't believe everything that's said in my church. Like I told you in my original video, if I don't believe it, I set it on the ground, and when nobody's looking, I use my heel and I kick it under my pew, and slide it back. I don't absorb it. I go by what God said, by what Jesus said in the book. That's it. We're all responsible for ourselves. Now, I hope you learned something about this. And I don't tell you these things to make you a dissident in the church or anything like that. Going to church is important. You have to get something out of church, though. You have to take what's good and move on and leave what's bad. That's the most important thing. The thing you're there is to unite your voice with other people, and that's the most important thing. And that's what I use church for, to become spiritually closer to God and have a church family and to be part of a church family. It's all very important. I hope I shed light on this. If you want, hit the subscribe button, to subscribe to me. You're not following me, you should be following Jesus. But you can subscribe to my channel and watch my videos if it helps you. I hope this one did. Are you surprised?
And you